Remember how you loved the stories at bedtime about princesses and fairy godmothers? Well, you may want to hold on tighter to your teddy bear and keep that nightlight on, because these are not your mother's bedtime stories.
Hello, welcome back to Not Your Mother's Bedtime Story. It's been a while, but the gang's all here. This is Colleen.
Chrissy's here.
Sherry's here.
And Karen the mom.
Well, before we get into our special guest for today, who has some great stories about a haunted house that she lived in, I'll let everyone recap what they've been up to lately.
It's been a hot minute, hasn't it? It's been a couple months. Yeah, we were just surviving winter.
Yeah, we got through football season. Unfortunately, the Packers didn't make it to the Super Bowl, but there's always next year. So hopefully your team won. But
yeah, we all survived Vegas as well. I don't think there was any strange encounters in Vegas that we had. Nothing unusual or out of the ordinary.
Except for an aggressive Spider-Man, all right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There was, where was that?
On the street.
Oh,
yeah, it was like when we went and had lunch. Where was that? A Guy
imagine
Fieri's?
that.
It was when we went to Guy Fieri's for lunch. He was like out in the street, but
boy, we're full of it today. We just got
yeah.
It's a Sunday. No.
Well, without further ado, I can't wait to hear Briana's story. So I'm gonna let her have the mic.
Okay. So I'm gonna talk about the house I grew up in. We bought a house. Well, we built the house in 2006, and we live in the Lakes regions of New Hampshire, and the property was actually right on a lake. Before the house was even completed, we started noticing some interesting things about the property. The biggest memory I really have is being downstairs in the house with my brother and looking out the window, and we could see actual orbs running through the grass. I mean, like the kind of orbs you would see in a picture, you could see with your naked eye, just dancing in the grass and along the wooded areas. And then just this feeling of being watched outside, in particular when you're walking up our long driveway. We had a lot of wood on either side of us, and it always just almost felt like someone was standing next to you, walking with you down the driveway. It was in a secluded area, so we had about 3 acres, and the driveway was about 3 acres. So when you were down at the road, you couldn't see the house, and vice versa. It was very tucked away. The house was closer to the lake, so you could look out the window and see the lake, and it was built on a hill, which is important to know when I start talking about what happened there. The home was built into a hill, and it was a raised ranch. So the top floor was all exposed, but downstairs, half of the house was inside the basement. It was inside the hill. And my brother and I lived downstairs on the side that wasn't in the hill. So we had windows and we could look out, and it was like a regular house. The land freaked us out, but my brother and I were young, and we're like, well, whatever. That was kind of weird what we just saw out the window, but it could have been anything, or that was just a cool experience. Then on the first night that I slept through the night at the house, I had this dream. And in the dream, everything outside was this like dark green color. And we were all outside on the front lawn looking at the lake. And my mom was outside with me, and she says, "Don't go in the water. There's a lady in the water." Almost as if I was in a trance, I ignored her and I walked to the edge of the dock, jumped in the water. And right when I did that, I felt a hand grab my ankle, and she started pulling me under the water. So I'm underneath, submerged in the water, and I look down, and there's a woman, and she is very, very pale and almost looked like her skin was molding. She had really long, thick black hair, and she wore a dirty white nightgown. And she was aggressive. I mean, she was grabbing my ankle, and she was trying her best to pull me down to the bottom of the lake. And I kept coming up for air, calling for my mom, and she kept saying, "It's too late now. The lady's got you." And so I woke up, and it was a nightmare, right? I mean, that's what it was. It was a nightmare. You know, we went about our day and whatever. And then in the coming week, I noticed that I was finding chunks of thick black hair in the drains of my shower. And as you can see from my hair, I have pretty thin brown, light brown hair. And that's pretty consistent with my whole family. My mom has darker hair, but it was always like this length. And when I say like thick, long black hair, I'm talking like long, thick strands of black hair. That got me thinking that, you know, maybe this was more than just a dream. And spirit does tend to talk to me through my dreams. So I do take that pretty seriously. And then, you know, throughout the years, we would see like black hair in places that there's just no way we'd find black hair. And it always was somehow connected to the water. We had a water trampoline, and over the summertime, you could just tuck your rafts underneath the trampoline so they wouldn't float away, but you wouldn't have to necessarily bring them all down the next day to throw them in the water. And it was almost like every single morning when we went out there, we'd pull out a raft, and there would be thick, black, long hair tucked all inside our rafts. And then, you know, as the years went on, we started to see her. So one of my most vivid memories of her was, it was actually the middle of winter, and the ice was very, very frozen. I mean, we were able to walk on it. People were driving on the lake. And my friend and I were just going for a nice walk on the lake. And there was a hole where someone had been ice fishing. So it wasn't fully frozen over there, but it wasn't like fresh, like open water either. And so what we heard first was the sound of like cracking thin ice, which got our attention. And when we looked over, we actually saw her. She had popped out of the hole of the ice, and her body flopped like a fish forward and smacked onto the ice and rolled back into the water. And I mean, it was the scariest thing I have ever seen in my life, and I will never.
Holy.
My friend and I were terrified. Of course, we were in middle school. We were like holding hands and running back to the house. But again, it was.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
I know, that's horrible.
Yeah, it was
full goosebumps this entire time.
Yeah, I mean, just like flop forward, smack on the ice, and her arms are up in like a U position, and her hair is in front of her, just dragging on the ice as she slowly slides back into the water.
That's like Ring imagery. Like I think of like the Ring.
Yes, she looks a lot like the Ring girl. That's exactly what I think of when I think of her.
Gosh.
And so when she was sliding back in, was it like she was being pulled back in, or was it like she was just couldn't get a grip? Like,
yeah, and you know, it almost seemed like she had jumped up and she didn't have enough grip on the ice, and so she just slid back into her hole. And it was only the top half of her body that came out. Like she jumped, smacked, and then slid down. It was horrifying.
And you both saw this, right? You said you and your friend. So your friend is seeing it too. I know we had talked about you that you know, have a little bit more in tune, a little bit more sensitive, but the fact that your friend, I mean, both of you are seeing it. So it's not just some sort of a hallucination, you know, that you're just like, oh, you know, I think it should be here. So it's here, but you're both seeing it.
We both
and
saw
not
it.
only seeing it, but hearing it.
Yeah.
And you're hearing the sound of the ice cracking. You're hearing the sound of her smacking the ice, and then that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then there was another time we were actually in the water, and I think this was the scariest moment of my entire life, because we're in the water on a water trampoline, and the only way to get back to shore is to jump in the water, right? So we're on the water trampoline. The sun's going down. It's pretty dark outside. And I was with a friend at this point too. We're sitting there, and all of a sudden we hear something flop out of the water again in a big splash next to the water trampoline. And it was loud. I mean, it sounded like someone had hopped into the water. And I'm maybe 30 seconds later, my little brother had run out on the deck and said, "Dad wants you to come in right now. He just heard, or he just saw something in the water. He's not sure what it is." Which I'm like, "Thanks, Dad." Like, now we have to jump in the water. But so my friend and I, just terrified, the sun's going down. We finally got up the courage to jump in the water and swam back. And we never had any issues with anyone grabbing us, but she was evidently there, and we could hear her splashing around in the water. The most interesting part of this is I didn't know this at the time because I was a young girl and my mom didn't want to scare me. But we did have a relative who has stories of the same lake, years, I mean, before I was even born, of a woman beckoning him into the water. He said that the woman was beautiful, though, which I thought was interesting. I'm not sure if maybe she had some sort of charm. I think she was a siren. But so basically, in his story, she was beckoning him into the water, and he was in this trance like I was in my dream. And he got almost to the water, and he somehow snapped out of it and didn't go in with her. So this has been a story that's been in our family for years that I didn't know about. And then we move into this home on the same lake, and I start having dreams and experiencing this woman in the water.
Yeah. So Briana, sorry to interrupt, but like, have you researched the history? Was there a woman that drowned in the lake or any other? Can you find anything like that?
The woman, we never figured it out. We really didn't. I will say that the land we built on is very heavily Native American land, and we found a lot of like arrowheads. So I'm not sure if maybe it was someone from way before we were even able to report news that someone drowned in the lake, or who knows at that point. I mean, the land itself was really, really scary and very active. And the water was no exception. I mean, it was just as freaky inside the water. So, I mean, your guess is as good as mine, but I do know that she's been sighted multiple times. My cousin Devin, who had spoken on your podcast earlier, had also seen her, and she describes her looking the same way that I did. So it's very interesting that women tend to see her as her ugly self, but then you have a young man who sees her and she's beautiful and she's singing him into the lake. So that's really one of our biggest stories with the house. But I would say that's probably the least of the haunting that happened there. That was something that, we dealt with and we knew in the back of our head. Yeah, there's a woman in the water. But there was a lot going on inside the house as well. So
sorry, Briana, before you move on to that, just a question. So did the hair appearing just continue?
Yep.
Or was there ever, it just kept going and there was never a stopping point? I mean, it just, I can't help but wonder if this woman, maybe she was, and if anyone's listening and they have more information on, Native Americans, but it seems, if she was maybe tragically killed or maybe something happened to her, obviously surrounding water, but it seems as if she's trying to lure people in. So she obviously isn't pleasant, and she wants to make others suffer or bring people in with her in some way, shape, or form, whether it's by force, like pulling you in, or luring people in like she was trying to do with your other family member. But I just wonder if, have there been any reports of anyone else, dying in that lake, or anyone else having, I was, something tried to pull me in or something? Has there been any talk around, the area or things like that?
Not that I'm aware of. There is someone who drowned in the lake in front of my house, and I do talk about him. He was present at our house quite frequently. So across from our home was a Boy Scout camp, and our land used to be a Girl Scout camp. So the story around that was that this man was swimming across the lake to meet up with the girls. And he got about halfway there and he drowned in front of my house. But that's really as much as I know about drownings on the lake. And I'm sure there are plenty of them. And I never really looked into it that deeply, so I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it seems like she is extremely active in whatever her pursuits of people are. I mean, whether it's, trying to come out of the water in the ice, that's so freaky. I can't, I have the image in my mind and I can't get it out. It's so scary.
I think you're very brave to actually go back swimming in that lake. I think
I would not go in there. No.
Well, I wanted to ask, did you walk over to where she was? Did you see drag marks in the ice, going back in? But I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure you probably.
No, we turned around. We got the heck out of there. It was one of those moments where you freeze for a minute and you really have to think back in your head, okay, did that really just happen? And then, of course, there was someone with me, so we both looked at each other what did we just see? It was one of the scariest things I've seen, for sure.
But it just seems like such a powerful entity. I mean, that she can manifest herself physically and touch things, and make sounds and, that to me is just crazy. I mean, usually you talk about floating spirit, she's an actual person, body with hands and hair. And I mean, and that just
everywhere that you're finding that hair,
the hair.
Something interesting too in itself.
Yeah, it's physical pieces of hair. And that never stopped. I mean, from the moment we moved into the home until I went off to college, we found black hair in our drains, specifically in my bathroom. So my bathroom was in the actual ground, and we did find that the portion of the home that was in the ground had more energy than the portion that was above the ground. So we are not sure if maybe that has some sort of connection to it, but it was always specifically the bathroom in the basement in the ground that we would find chunks of hair in all the time. Inside the house was just as bad. So you're describing how you can't believe, that it was like a physical person and it wasn't just a wispy or a sound, but the home was the same way. So back in the day, I believed that we had 3 ghosts. Looking at it as an adult who's done a little more research now, I believe that we had 2 spirits and we had a poltergeist. So I'm going to try to talk briefly about the spirits, and then I'm going to focus more on the poltergeist because that's where a lot of my childhood trauma, per se, comes into play. And I mean, just crazy things happened in our home. So there was the lady in the lake, and then there was a man. The man would come to me quite frequently, and he would make me stuck in my sleep. I don't know if you've ever had sleep paralysis, but I would get it quite often in that home. And I did find after I moved out of the home, I've experienced it maybe an additional 3 or 4 times in my entire life. And I've been moved out of that home for about 10 years now. I used to get sleep paralysis, I'd say 3 or 4 times a week. And in those episodes, there would be a man in my room. And the man was tall. He had very dark hair. He was very oppressive. He was mean. He was very mean. And he'd laugh at me. So my mom would always tell me, if you're afraid and you see the spirit, you say, I'm a child of God and you cannot touch me. And so I would be stuck in bed, paralyzed in my sleep, staring at him. And I'd be saying, I am a child of God. You cannot touch me. And he'd look at me in the eyes and he'd laugh. So that always just, it scared me so bad as a child. And it was just this indescribable feeling of every time I went to sleep, am I going to wake up? I'm going to get stuck in my sleep tonight. Is there going to be a spirit in my room? And he started by visiting my room in the opposite corner, or I would feel that someone was walking down the hall towards my bedroom. By the end, once I got to the age of about 16, he would get really close to me, and it would be more like I would wake up to a man inches away from my face, and he always breathed really heavily, and it sounded like he sounded like he couldn't breathe. in my mind at the time, I always felt like maybe that was the man that had drowned in the lake. But looking back, I don't believe that anymore, because when I went off to college, he actually did follow me for a few years. So I don't believe that this was an entity that was attached to the home. But I do believe that the land and the energy that came from this home made his presence way more real than what it would be at any other home.
Briana, just a question. Could you make out his features? Like, could you tell, was he from like this modern time, or was he from another time, like an old?
Or was he also Native American? You said he had dark hair.
Nope, he wasn't. He was a white man. He had black hair. He had black eyebrows, and he was pale. I never really could make out what he was wearing. If he was wearing something that I can make out, it usually was like a t-shirt. So I wouldn't say he was very old. I wouldn't say he was Native American. But his features were not too distinctive for me to be able to place him in a certain time period, as where I've seen other spirits where I've seen their whole outfit and I'm like, okay, I can pinpoint where you came from. He was different. He was very much not attached to anything but me. It's actually, we believe, a generational thing, because my mom also remembers him growing up and can describe the same man that followed her.
I was going to ask you who else saw him, and your mom did.
And so, my mom did. My mom saw him quite a bit growing up, and he did the same thing. He'd paralyze her in her sleep, and he got very close to her as she got older. And then, it was almost like she aged out, and I did too. And I just had my first daughter, and I knew it was a girl before we knew it was a girl, because I could feel him when I found out I was pregnant. He would watch us. He watched me in the shower a lot. So, I'd be taking a shower and it felt like someone was standing behind me, or there'd be times where like shampoo bottles would fall. And again, we had a poltergeist in the house as well, so it's kind of hard to decipher what part of that was the poltergeist and what part of that was this generational.
They're all just hanging out in the shower with you, It's like a party.
The lady, she's throwing her hair out of the drain.
Right.
The man's hanging out. The poltergeist is throwing shampoo at me.
Stay away
There's a lot of
from the shower. Oh my gosh.
I would have been filthy. I would have
you're like,
oh god.
Forget it.
Just getting clean off in the lake because there's stuff in the lake. Like, how can you get clean?
No, I mean this
hosing off in the yard.
Yeah.
Just have the guy. Oh, you can do my back. It's like, geez.
This house really tortured me as a child, and it's something that I do look back at with a lot of fear, even still after years of moving past them and being able to recognize that this did happen, but I'm safe now and it's okay.
But the scary thing is, like you said, it followed you after you left the house too. So people are always like, oh yeah, our house is haunted. We'll leave and we'll get better. But the fact that like you removed yourself from that location and it's still... So how long or how old were you when you first saw him versus your last time? Like what time period was it?
I first saw him, I would say, when I was going through puberty, around 10 to 12 age range. And then by 16, 17, he would get very close to me. In college, he followed me for a few years. And we had issues, like my first dorm room. I thought I had gotten away from it all. I was a freshman in college. And it was very evident the first couple weeks that no, I didn't, and he did follow me. My roommates would literally stay awake at night terrified because the stuff on my desk would move around. One of my poor roommates did wake up and she saw a man sitting at the edge of my bed. So this is these spirits that I've encountered. It's not just me. It's almost like I'm able to project them onto other people as well, which always made me feel really guilty, especially as like a teenager and a young girl sharing a room with these two poor strangers that are like, okay, my roommate just brought a demon to college. So
you bring the toaster, you bring the TV, I got the ghost.
Yeah. So we're we're getting ourselves prepared for my daughter to see him as well, and trying to figure out what that's going to look like. So
man.
that's something that we definitely believe is generational, and we've had a few tarot readings that it's been confirmed. And he's alluded to the fact that he's supposed to be with us for I think it was 8 generations. And so my daughter would be we believe it started with my great grandmother, even though she apparently told everyone she never saw a ghost in her life. She's full of shit. I really do feel that she definitely saw something, because I've had a few tarot readings and they've all said the same thing, and I've also had dreams about it. So my daughter would be the 5th generation. So we're just kind of interested.
Have you ever tried to seek help, either, like you said, tarot readings, but any sort of spiritual help, any sort of spiritual cleansing or anything to try to rid yourself of it?
This is a whole other can of worms. I grew up in a very abusive Christian church, very cult-like. And so there was a pastor at the church who would come over quite frequently and cleanse the home. And I think he made it worse because he was a very abusive leader in the Christian church. And at the time, I was so young that was just the pastor came and blessed. I didn't know any better. As I got older, I was in college, and the last visit I had from the man, he touched me. He was on my chest, and I could feel him pushing at me, and he was laying on top of me, and he was laughing at me. And I called my mom, and she did something, and she said some sort of prayer over me, and she closed my third eye. And things went really quiet for a little while, and I haven't really experienced him since. So whatever she did that day really did do the trick.
You talked about I think you said it was your great grandma who said that she had never seen. I mean, to me, that's where I would want to dig in more, because first of all, if she's saying that she never saw, but this is where you think that this is coming from, it almost seems to me like there was some kind of an event or something happened or something triggered this entity to attach itself. So whether she was there when he actually died or knew of it somehow, or there was some kind of, curse that was laid upon her and her family to have him, maybe he did it. Maybe she wronged him in some way, or maybe somebody that she was close to wronged him in some way for him to latch on, where it would make sense if she was denying it because she doesn't want to bring light to that. She doesn't want to admit that or identify that and say that, yes, I know what happened, or if I ignore it, maybe it'll just go away. But to me, that's where I feel like the source is, and where it goes back to, and almost if you can figure it out, there's some kind of debt to be paid, or there's something owed. I mean, especially the way that he is so mean and, laughing. It's almost as if when you were saying, I am a child of God, you can't touch me, and he's laughing, he's almost as if he knows better. It doesn't matter. You can say whatever you want to me, and I'm still going to be here because this is what I'm doing. This is my attachment. This is where I'm coming from. So I feel like and I don't know if this came out in any other readings or if there's any, but I feel like that's where the source starts, and that's where it need to be traced back to, something happened or something, something big to make him be attached.
Yeah. One of our readings, he basically told the reader that he was owed my daughter. It was very, very gross. Well, it just makes me want to cry because it's just disgusting. But I did also have a pretty powerful dream, and in the dream, it was my great grandmother, and she was sitting on a rocking chair. And on one leg, she had we kept saying, "Oh, her firstborn daughter." And then on her other leg, she had this disgusting black troll, I don't even know how to describe what it was, sitting on her knee. And she was rocking both of them in a rocking chair together. Everyone kept coming by and saying, "Look at your grandmother holding her 2 babies, her firstborn daughter." And it kept happening over and over and over again. And this was also around the time that I found out I was pregnant. So I do feel like someone was trying to warn me about this entity. Whoever he is, he feels he's owed to us. And he's already told us that, I'm owed your daughter and I will be there. And I will be there for the next 3 or 4 generations after that.
It feels like a demon. That's
Right.
I think
right.
I do feel like it's probably
does.
more of a demonic.
It's like Rosemary's Baby or something.
Yeah.
Oh my
Well, that's what I
gosh,
mean. Like,
that's
so
right.
I wonder if there was like some kind of deal struck or something that
Right.
happened. I mean, it just seems so, like you said, like he's laughing, like he knows, like, yeah, you can do whatever you want. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. I did go to a reading, and she opened my third eye back up, and we immediately heard him laughing in the distance, and she got so scared she closed it again. So whatever it is, even she was terrified of it, and she had goosebumps, and she reads people all day long. So I don't quite know what it is, and she didn't really tell me. No one's really said exactly what it is, but it's been confirmed that, he's going to keep coming for generations to come. So
it does seem very demonic.
Yeah, it is something.
You had mentioned early on that you could see the orbs and see, like, felt that people were watching you. Was the energy, was it just you could feel them, or did you feel negative or positive energy one way or another?
The home and the land is very oppressive. It's not positive energy. It's very negative. You don't feel peace there. You really don't. Our neighbor, there was a language barrier. I believe she was German. She didn't speak much English at all, so it was kind of hard to like really connect with her on this. But she was also tortured at her home, and she'd say the same thing, that there were spirits in the woods. She lived alone, the poor thing, and she would call her son a lot, crying, and she was terrified of her home and of the outside as well, to the point where, she was almost agoraphobic, like she just wouldn't leave her home. So whatever it was in the woods there, it wasn't friendly. It didn't want us there. It was angry that we had built on the land, and it basically just tortured anyone who came on. Didn't care if you've never seen a spirit in your life or if you're not sensitive to it. I'm here, and that we don't want you here, so we're gonna throw things at you. We're gonna wake you up in the middle of the night. I don't quite know what it is, other than I feel like they just felt like we were on their land.
And has your family since moved away?
Yes. Yep. They moved while I moved out of the home when I turned 18 to go to college. And then I moved on, and I moved across the country for quite some time, and they had sold the house in the meantime. And the new owners there haven't reported anything. So I'm not really sure what they're feeling or what happens there now. But as far as we're concerned, we haven't had any issues with our home since. My mom definitely still has some furniture pieces from the old home. And for example, 2 days ago, I walked into her home and I felt very sick. I almost passed out. I felt like I had drinking 3 glasses of wine. And it happened 2 days in a row until she realized she had brought in a basket from my old bedroom into the home. She removed it out of the home, and the energy was better by the next day. And that, I'm barely even talking about the house. So much happened there that was just torturous. So besides the individual spirits, there definitely was a poltergeist in the home, I believe. Weird things would happen, such as there was one morning where I'd woken up and I was getting ready for school. And when I was blow drying my hair, I used to like bend over with my head upside down and just blow my head upside down. And I noticed that the room got really dark. And so when I put my head up, the entire room had a black cloud in it, and it was coming from my closet. So it was this big black cloud coming from the closet. It filled the whole room, and it was getting closer and closer and closer to me. And I was terrified. I dropped my hairdryer and I ran out of the room. And when we went back, it was gone. Later on, we find out that my brother also had this same issue happen to him a few times in that specific room, where there would be a black cloud that would come out of the closet or fill the bedroom. We also had issues with toys. So we had my nephew living there briefly, and he had a lot of toys, just like any other kid would have. And we would get blocks thrown at us from down the hallway. We would get his toys would turn on by themselves and go across the room. You'd be upstairs, and it was the strangest sound, and I don't really know exactly how to describe it other than it would sound like all the windows were open. We were in a windstorm, and someone threw reams of paper on the floor. And it was like the sound of like rustling paper in the wind downstairs, and it would get really, really loud, like to the point where you were like a little afraid to look over the railing and see what you were going to see, because could that really be a ghost? But then you'd go downstairs and there'd be absolutely nothing there. And we never quite figured out what that sound could mean, but it happened a lot. It was like the sound of just like papers rustling on the floor. We had a lot of issues with electronics. So in the middle of the night, my father's office was the one in the basement in the ground. That computer always had issues and would start blasting music in the middle of the night.
God.
You'd go and turn it off. It would turn back on. Or, when you're on your computer and you press a key and the computer is like, nope, error, and it'd be like, dong, dong, dong. Yep. That would start happening in the middle of the night. Like someone's just pressing the key over and over and over and over again. Dunk, 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 dunk. And it was so loud. And we would go to the extent of turning off the speakers before we went to bed, and it would still turn on in the middle of the night. And then there were things that were more physical, attacking me. So there was one morning I woke up and there were black fingerprints that had appeared. It looked like someone had dipped their fingers in charcoal, and there were black fingerprints walking up my wall, onto the ceiling, and in a circle around my bed.
Oh my God.
And those fingerprints were so dark that there was no mistaking that they weren't there the night before. I don't know what child is able to touch the ceiling. They looked like children. It looked like a child. And so my parents were like, oh, your brother did that to scare you in the middle of the night. I'm like, he's like 4 foot tall. You think in the middle of the night he dragged a ladder in the room and I didn't wake up to the sound of him on my bed doing circles on my ceiling. So we never quite figured that one out because it was strange. It was a child, and we did have a little boy in the house. He was the least active spirit, but he wasn't scary, and I don't believe it was him. I feel like it may have been the poltergeist trying to make us feel fearful versus the actual child ghost.
So did you have to clean the fingerprints? Like, were you able to clean them off?
Yeah, it was charcoal. It was like,
and did you have?
It was charcoal. It was charcoal. We had a wood stove downstairs. It was the middle of summer though. It wasn't like we were using the wood stove actively. But that's only, I don't know where the charcoal came from. It literally looked like someone like rubbed their hands on a barbecue, or like it was black charcoal, thick black charcoal. And so what is very unnerving is, I had the fingerprints in the charcoal. And then, moving forward years and years later, my little brother is experiencing a lot of the same things that happened in the home, in his home. And he does have the bed that belonged to the bedroom with the black cloud in his house. And more recently, he woke up to the sound of someone walking around upstairs playing with his electronics and a giant footprint of sawdust on his couch.
Yeah. And that's what I think we have that picture, I think, right? Maybe I'll put it on our social media if
you have it,
if you're wanting to, but yeah.
Oh, it's about double the size of his actual foot, and he can definitely tell a story a lot better than I can. But it's not even a human. It looks like a human foot, but it's double the size of a human foot, and it's a perfect foot shape. And that's what we experienced at my house, at the house as well, in my bedroom, was perfect, beautiful, human-like fingerprints, but in a pattern that is not feasible unless someone literally had a ladder or they were 8 foot tall, because the ceilings are pretty tall. It was a new home.
Yeah, and it is interesting. So we talked about, I mean, you associate these things happening with the house, but then there are things that are happening, like even after you guys leave the house, like, you talked about the basket, like bringing back like bad vibes and, things following you to college and now things following your brother. It's interesting that like it started with the house maybe, but it's still continuing even after you've left that physical house.
Yeah. Yep. I feel like that's why I feel it's a poltergeist, because I feel like this energy has somehow been able to latch on to certain items in our home and move forward with us. But if you get rid of the item, it no longer can bother you. So it's almost like it's been able to latch on to these items that were significant at the time for them. And I don't know. I mean, it's the weirdest thing. Like you can touch a basket and you are terrified, or you feel sick. You feel like you're going to throw up. You move it out of your home and you feel fine.
And the thing with poltergeists too, like they can start and stop, with no warning. Like you'll have like, months of just activity and then nothing. They do tend to center around people, especially adolescents. So you kind of have that going. I don't know how old your brother is, but he's an adult now too, or is he young?
He is an adult. He just turned 25.
Yeah, but I think like with the house and the land, it seemed like there was a lot of activity. So I think that's part of it. So that could have, just really upped its game, if you will. I mean, all this activity, all these things. But I think like what Chrissy was getting at is that you all as your family, I think, are also open and, have this, maybe spirits are just more attracted to you. So that could mean why it follows you, or it seems to be it's like, oh, well, I'm going to go where this person is going because I know I can get their attention. I know I can have an effect on them. I'm going to do that. Like the people that moved into your house, there could still be spirits, but they could just be completely closed off to it, that it doesn't make any difference. They could be, they could be trying their darndest to get their attention, and these people are just completely blocked out of it, and it doesn't matter. But I think, if you're open to it and they have the ability to present themselves, and then once it's recognized, then it's going to keep happening. Or maybe because we've heard these stories before too, where it's like the house is so active, and then when this group leaves it and another one comes in and they're like, no, I've had nothing. There's nothing there. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, there's so many different things that play into it. But I think too, the other common thing that I feel like we hear is that when there is a poltergeist, there usually is multiple entities. So there's like you said, that there were spirits, plus there was this poltergeist. Like, I don't know if they feed off of each other, but I mean, now that we've established that the man could be actually a demonic presence, I mean, now there's just all kinds of things going on where it's just like, it's manifesting all these things, and all of these entities could just be like, party, I mean, like, oh, we're just all coming in, to see what can happen, and, just attaching themselves to whatever they can grab onto. Is just, it's crazy.
That's definitely, you nail it. I mean, it's like I feel the land at the home was very energetic, and it was able to breed all of these different entities to come together, and they fed off of each other, which is why we felt so tortured growing up. And then, we leave the property, but it didn't stay at the property. It came with us because it was attached to us specifically. And I think the land itself was some sort of energy hole where it was just able to be more active and more present.
This just kept going on for years and years. Did you just finally kind of accept it, or just every time it happened, it was just like a new terror? Or did you just kind of like, oh, that they're up to their old tricks again? Did you just...
Yeah, a little of both. I mean, things like I had a bed on wheels, and my bed every single night, my entire childhood, would shake every night. I mean, I'd lay in bed and it would shake so bad that the wheels would squeak.
Oh my God.
And that happened every single night. And at first, obviously, I'm crying and I'm scared because I'm a little girl. But then, I mean, every single night you get used to it, and you lay down and you're like, okay, my bed's going to start squeaking now. And there's just nothing I can do about it. Am I going to stay up and just be afraid every night, or am I going to sleep through the damn squeaking? So there were things like that. But then there were also moments where like a specific event would happen. Like one time I was home alone, And to this day, I'm not quite sure if it was a mixture of some of like the neighborhood kids trying to play a prank on me, but I was upstairs and all of the windows on that lower level. So it sounded like someone was walking around the house banging on the windows. And at first I went downstairs, I'm looking around, there's nothing there, right? So I go back upstairs, banging, 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 the entire house, all the windows are banging. And then, I go upstairs, I look over, and my rocking chair is going back and forth, rocking with nothing in it.
Chair. I hate rocking chairs.
Yeah. And then my mom loves to pick up the scariest rocking chairs from the antique stores too. So the whole house is just full of these
there you go.
haunted antiques. Yeah.
You didn't have any creepy dolls.
Oh, don't worry. She had a clown collection. So we had Raggedy Ann upstairs. We had dolls and clowns.
Oh no.
Yeah, she loves all of her antiques. So. But yeah, like that day I ran out on the back deck, and as I closed the door, there was a breath mark and a little child's handprint appeared on the inside of the window. So things like that, like a moment or event like that, that's scary because it's something new. But something like my bed squeaking and moving every single night, you get used to it.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I don't think I could. But.
No, as I said, you're crying as a little girl. I'm like, I'd be crying as an adult if my bed is creaking at night.
Yeah. And my parents tried not to scare us, so they believed a lot of what was going on, but they were trying their best to not feed into it, which, and like hindsight, kind of made things worse because I felt like I was crazy. Growing up, my mom's like, yeah, well, someone did drown in the middle of the lakes. There was a little boy, or yeah, there is a man that follows our generations. Or I'm like, that would have been nice to know when I was going through this, right? But she was just trying her best.
I think crazy.
I think you get the award for like the most goosebumps I've ever had in an episode. I was like, man,
yes, absolutely.
It started with the woman in the lake, and it's like just kept.
What you? What? When you said that wasn't the worst thing that happened, I was like,
we also had in the front yard of the home, and I still have no idea what this entity was, but from time to time you would see a man in a black cloak with a hood standing in our front yard, and he would just stare at the house, but from like a healthy distance away. And that was also very strange and something that myself and my brother saw quite frequently. And that's something that we didn't even talk about until we were adults. And all of a sudden we're like, do you remember that man with the black cloak? And we both have vivid memories of him staring at the home. So I have literally no idea, because that one doesn't even line up with the Native American ground or the spirits inside the home. I have no idea.
Can I ask how you know it was a man? Like, could you see his face?
I guess I'm just kind of guessing it was a man because it was a big cloak and he was very tall, and he just kind of gave me a feeling that he was a man. But I mean, everyone's guess is, I mean, it probably wasn't even a man, if we're being honest.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Like, maybe it was something else entirely.
Well, what I'm wondering too is that with you being sensitive, like I feel like maybe you were a magnet and maybe it was the man with the cloak's like way of getting through. He stayed at a distance, which is interesting, but maybe it was just his way of kind of, he was drawn to your energy and
yeah, I do believe that that's definitely going on. And it does happen if I'm around someone who's lost a loved one, or if I'm living in an old home, or I'm around a lot of different people or energies, or I'm stressed out. I tend to draw people or spirits in to me. So it could have been something like that. It's interesting. My little brother saw it as well. So I'm not sure if, again, I was just able to project that onto him as well when we were younger. But it is very interesting, and I feel like a lot of things that visited me that I felt growing up were attacking specifically me, that made me feel like really lonely and afraid. They also happened to my brother, and they happened to my mom, and they happened to my cousin when she came over. So I do find a little peace in that it seems almost like it was an attachment to the land or the family or our belongings versus just me. And but there definitely is an aspect of that I believe is just me, unfortunately.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's even more stories that I won't even delve into because it's just, I mean, it's like you go down a rabbit hole and there's just so much that happened, but it was just thing after thing, day after day. And then I would say maybe every couple of months we'd have a big episode, like the handprint in the window or the fingerprints or the black cloud. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know what happened there or why it was so haunted, but that was my childhood. It's crazy to think back and talk about it like this because I'm like, how the heck did I survive sleeping in that house every day as a young child? I don't know. I have no idea, but they definitely makes for a good camp story.
That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
And not your traditional haunted house either. I mean, something that was built by your family, you were the first residents, it's always kind of like,
right.
No, it was brand new. And so you're going into this thinking, there, by all means, this should not be haunted. Who knows? Yeah. So you're not necessarily safe if you build the house yourself, I guess. It's the message.
That was a key giveaway. My brother's house is brand new too. We have issues there, and my dad built that one. And then he just renovated our home, and I'm like, Dad, if my house is haunted, we know it's you. So luckily this house feels great, but it's kind of a running joke in my family. Like, why are all our brand new houses just haunted? Like they're thousands of years old. We don't know.
My gosh, yeah, this was a lot to unpack. I was not expecting this. We've been off for 2 months. It just got slammed with a big one. Like, woo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I know. That's awesome.
Well, not awesome, but
Yep. Thank you, Briana.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This was kind of fun to talk it all over with all of you.
Yeah, it was a great story. Yeah, we'd love to hear more too.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Oh, could you imagine going through that almost on a daily basis? Like she said, her bed every night. How do you live with that? Because a little kid, you're just like, God, my bed's shaking. Oh, it's all right. It'll go away. It's like, no, it won't. It just keeps happening and happening. It's like, gosh.
Well, I mean, you know what I think about though, too? It's like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure her she said her parents kind of try to downplay it and everything like that. But, I almost think about, you get used to it. It's like, think about, Grandma and Grandpa's house. They lived right next to a railroad track. It's like, yeah, you would hear it and then you would get used to it and you wouldn't hear the train anymore. I know that's a terrible,
right. No, I understand what you're saying. You get used to it. Right. You just accept it as.
Right. It's like you're expecting it to happen. You know that train is going to go through every single night at some point. She's like, I went to bed and it's like, okay, my bed's going to shake tonight. But it seemed to her that was just, a given, but it was the other things that would have more, she's like, the more unexpected things that would happen, the bigger events that would happen. It was what kind of unnerved her. It's like, yeah, I got used to my bed shaking.
The man, that would just laugh at her.
That just, there's like, something there. There is something there that gives me
I still think they need to attempt to cleanse that
from what they are,
from their family, but
that
I do too, because something attached to him, a long time ago, like generations. Like, I feel, he's. I'll be with you.
There's a debt to be paid, and
It reminds me of like that. It reminds me of that Lasher and the demon. That Lasher demon. It's the Mayfair witches, where the demon like is attached to all the female. That's what it started to remind me of. Like the demon goes from the next generation to the next. But they need like the 13 generations.
Well, it's almost too like that the story from Paranormal Activity where it was like, there was like some deal struck with a demon to have like the firstborn male, and there was no males that had been born. But that demon was going to continue to be a part of their family and wreak havoc until it got what it wanted or until its debt was paid. And the dream that she had with her great grandma in the rocking chair.
But that kind of confirms it. That it started with her great grandma. So she did something. Yeah, something happened with
That's what I said. Yeah, I'm saying.
Right.
if she's not, and if she's denying it, like, I'm trying.
Or maybe she like had a child. Maybe she like maybe there was some kind of deal she struck. Maybe she was having some like difficulty conceiving, or there was like a child that was like health. She had a baby and the baby was in bad health, and she like struck some kind of deal with to make the baby
right.
Be healthy.
It would. It's kind of like,
make it really
yeah,
good.
It's
Like
like for
really
generations. I'm going to haunt you for generations, or your daughters. It's like each daughter.
All right. Well, this one is getting pretty long, so I'm gonna.
All right.
I guess for now, take it away, Mom.
Thank you for listening, and remember to keep that night light on. Good night, sweet dreams.
If you have a story to share, please send it to notyourmothersbedtimestory@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Not Your Mother's Bedtime Story. And please help us grow by following us on your favorite podcast platform, leaving us a positive review, and telling a friend. Thank you for your support.